All right, welcome to another live with Hanifa Nayela. It is me, Hanifa Nayela, and it is no different. Today is Monday, and we are always here on Monday at 6 p.m. to bring something to you guys, and hopefully something that provokes thought or encourages change in your life. Today is no different. I have here with me another guest. I know last week we had Mwansha Edu, and they came through and talked about pretty much Black love and healing the relationship between Black men and Black women. And today, we're going to tackle it from a different angle. And this is why I wanted this specific person on to have this conversation. How are you today, Mr. Umawale?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well. I am well. First of all, I am honored to have you here on my platform to have this conversation. I was on your platform, not your platform, but in your chat. I've been in your chat for a little bit. I've been watching, following you on YouTube for quite some time, actually,
Yeah.
because it's difficult to find channels like yours in the space. And so when I did, I kind of latched onto it. And so ever since then, I've been a fan. But I know in the last couple of weeks, it's been very interesting. And you attempted to have a conversation around our ego,
Yes.
Black women, because I don't separate myself from the collective in that sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and say Black woman's ego, ours. And it proved to be pretty difficult to the point where you had to have three parts.
Yeah,
and
nearly impossible.
And so I want to start off talking about that. First of
Yeah.
all, why don't you just tell us, well, tell the listeners who you are, and sort of like what you do, and also what you do, what your focus of your YouTube platform is.
Oh, wow. Well, first and foremost, I appreciate the invitation. Definitely looking forward to the dialogue. I'm a fan of yours as well. Like, I'm a
Oh,
fan of
really?
anybody who is doing work to have conversations or discussions that serve to kind of like bridge and heal the many different dynamics that exist, within our community. So, I'm a big fan of yours as well. But who I am, I guess that, I wear many different hats. I guess my primary roles, I'm a father, I'm a husband.
Mhm.
Um, I'm someone who, loves Black people deeply. I'm born and raised in a predominantly Black neighborhood. I have a pretty extensive background just in organizing, right? Doing
Mhm.
work. To try to advance or improve, conditions among us where we can. My work right now is really centered around, Black men and
Mhm.
Black male development. So I have a collective called Cobra Calisthenics where, we work with brothers physically, mentally, spiritually, to really just try to develop and grow and to transform.
Mhm.
So that's one of my primary projects that I'm involved in. I'm also a filmmaker. I put
Oh,
out my
okay.
first documentary back in November of 2020. I'm currently working on a new project that is still in the pre-production phase. We're still raising funding for that. So I do a lot. I do a lot. I wear many different hats. I hold many different offices, but
Mhm.
uh, chief among them would be father and husband. And that's a transformative process in and of itself. This is actually my wife calling me right now, and I got to text her and let her know I'm on a live. But yeah, that's me. That's me in a nutshell. So
Okay, thank you. What I actually wanted to start off talking about is you made an attempt recently, and which created a lot of controversy around the topic or the focus, your focus on the last, not the last, well, yeah, the last 3 weeks on your platform. Can you tell me what you was attempting to do?
um we were attempting to have a conversation around we called it confronting the Black female ego. And
Mhm.
essentially what it inspired that conversation prior to the three-part series, there was a lot of discussion happening after the TikTok therapist had
Yes.
went viral, and she was
Mhm.
talking about Black men and our lack of emotional intelligence and or lack of emotional development.
Mhm.
Which was, it was an interesting, conversation. Like, I've had similar conversations. And I tune into brothers who have those conversations quite frequently. So I was like,
Mhm.
cool, like that's a that's a great conversation. It's one that we need to have. However, that conversation becomes incomplete, if we aren't talking about, black women and their level of emotional maturity, and or emotional development. So, in attempting to kind of like have that conversation, we wanted to see if we could actually have a discussion where we could be honest and have a discussion around ego.
Mhm.
And I think that, because of the space that we exist within, we always have to remember that everybody is at different spaces within their journey.
That's true.
So while I was hoping we could have a deeper conversation, it really did stay surface.
Mhm.
A lot of people wanted to have a conversation around self-esteem and pride. But what I really wanted to structure was a much more deeper and transformative conversation
Mhm.
around ego and how
Mhm.
it, if unchecked, right? If out of balance, could serve to hinder harmonious relationships within our community. So I wanted to explore that, in an open and honest way. And just given the space, that we're in, this virtual space, the gender war dynamics that exist here, there were just so many people who were deflecting and just not allowing that conversation to even get off the ground. And I see my sister to my eye in the chat.
I'm about to go in right now and say hi
Mhm,
to everyone.
mhm.
Okay, so first of all, let me shout you guys out. Hey, Annie, thanks for passing through. Always showing love and support. I see Enya in the chat. Hey, Enya. Thanks for passing through and showing your love and support as usual. Peace to my good sis, Ma'at. Hey, Ma'at speaks. Thank you for passing through, sis. And then we have Ty 313.
That's my
That's
guy.
Ty. That's a guy.
That's my guy. That's my
Oh,
guy.
okay. I was gonna say he said, okay. He said, peace and peace to you as well. He says, passing by. Thank you for passing by, Ty. I really do appreciate your presence. So Omawale, being what you just said you wanted to accomplish, why do you think you weren't able to do that? Well, maybe you were. Maybe I'm assuming. Do you think you were able to accomplish that which you set forth to accomplish? And if not, why do you think that is?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I would say that there are a multitude of reasons why. Um I think that if you want to have those types of conversations, um so there's a couple of responses that I could give here, right? So in terms of like the effectiveness of actually achieving that goal,
Yeah.
I think it requires a different space. I don't know if the virtual
Mm,
space is the best environment to have a productive or constructive conversation along those lines,
that's a good point.
especially when you have so many people who are locked into conflict with one another. So,
Mhm.
like, when you have people who consider themselves in a war, and to concede or admit anything is like is it's akin to admitting defeat. So folks are really just trying to like score points, so it becomes very difficult to have an honest conversation, just brother to brother, sister to sister, right?
Mhm.
So in that regard, I acknowledge the limitations of the virtual world, but
Okay.
I recognize the space that we exist in. So if anything, understanding that YouTube is an entertainment platform first and foremost,
Mhm.
what I really hope to achieve with many of these conversations is just the lifting up of alternative perspectives that can kind of like lead in a more holistic or healing direction, which is why it was important to have voices like my aunt speaks
Mhm.
on that panel. And also, what I also try to facilitate is an environment where the opposite sides of a discussion point can actually speak to one another. So I really went out of my way to try to find who I thought were intelligent representatives of the different perspectives that exist in these spaces,
Mhm.
because the way that these algorithms essentially fragment us like never before. We spend so much time in these social media spaces, and your algorithm really does curate your appetite, and it refines your appetite. So you end up being locked in spaces with people who only think like you do, right?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then men that have a certain perspective and women that have a certain perspective will never have the opportunity to speak to one another. We'll never have the opportunity to hear and to be heard. So what I try to do is create that environment where both sides can hear and
Mhm.
be heard from one another. But again, sometimes people don't show up to actually have a good faith discussion that's rooted kind of like in truth and reconciliation. They show up because either they're clout chasing or they want to score points because like it's a battle for them. So no, I that what I hoped to achieve was not achieved. However, I did do my best to cultivate an environment where a discussion could be started that at least changes in a small degree the direction and the tone that the conversation usually has in these
Mhm.
cases, right? So I'll give myself that small amount of credit.
You made an attempt 3 times, sir. That's a lot.
I did.
That's most that most people. That's more than most people are willing to do. Honestly. Hey Tristan, I just want to make sure I shout you out. And hey, Mr. DeWitt, thank you for passing through as usual. So here's my thing. Okay, so I was calling it a gender war at first, and I stopped because I don't think that what we're seeing amongst black men and black women has anything to do with gender, right? I think that there's a bigger picture. There's something bigger at play, right? Bigger than us, bigger than our egos, bigger than our pettiness, bigger than our bickering, and even I would dare even say bigger than our traumas, which we end up bleeding all over each other in this space oftentimes. So for me, I'm like, is this feels more like a power struggle? It's almost like um a struggle between black men and black women for proximity, to whiteness,
Hmm.
and I know we're not calling it that, and I think oftentimes we hide behind these different euphemisms in a sense, or titles, and I think this is one of them. I don't think that what's happening between black men and black women is necessarily a gender war. I just think that there's an elephant in the room that we're just not willing to face, and so it's easier it's easier for us to turn on each other. I tell people all the time, the picture that comes to my mind, and I come from the child welfare space, but so bear with me. So the picture that comes to mind is two children in a home
Hmm.
that's abusive. Okay, they're small, they're young children. Here are these big adults that's abusing them. Okay, so what happens to the children is they start fighting each other, right? Because they both feel too small to fight the real enemies, which is the abusive adults in the home. So they turn their frustration, because that energy got to go somewhere. They turn their frustration and their anger and everything else on each other, right? While the adults continue to abuse them. That is exactly how I see this whole thing playing out between black men and black women. But what I wanted to ask you, is this a new phenomena, or has this always been something that has been happening, perhaps maybe from plantation days? Is it something that may have went underground and it's just kind of been boiling, and now we're kind of seeing it, the climax of it? What do you think?
That's a good question. To a degree,
Mhm.
what we are seeing right now is new
Okay.
because we've never seen black people express hate and disdain for one another in the ways in which um, social media and the digital world has now made commonplace.
Okay.
There's always been critique. You can even question, the values that some of us have developed, as a result of interfacing with these Western institutions. So it gives us a certain idea about, black men and or black women, right? So that lends towards some of the friction, right? So there's always been friction there, but not what we are seeing now. What we are seeing now is a level of menticide that I think is driven just by a variety of factors that really induce, like a mass psychosis that's rooted in fear and desire for survival, and desire for protection, and then there's elements of rejection and betrayal that are baked into this powder keg that just make it a very explosive and toxic environment. So,
Mhm.
I, there's always been an element there, but what we're seeing now, and this is different. This is different because what we're doing is we're making self removal and self deletion um something that we are now promoting. It's like widespread, right? Because all of the solutions to the so-called gender conflict are solutions that ultimately point to our removal in a generation or two, or ensure
Mhm.
that our children will be successively less black until they are made white.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think I'll tackle it that way.
Mhm.
But I would like to, at some point in the conversation, speak to the environmental piece, because I think that the ecosystem or the atmosphere, right? The atmospheric conditions that produce either healthy or toxic gender relations matter. And I think that that gets to that elephant in the room that you're speaking about.
Mhm.
That plays a major role, and that can only be ignored to our own detriment.
So, and I want you to go there because you, you brought it up. So let's just do it. But a part of my confusion is always that. So I'm always questioning, like, do we not see what has happened to Black people? What has brought us to where we're at to this day? To where I'm confused as to why that doesn't encourage us to have a little bit more grace towards each other when we interact, when we engage with each other, when we have conversations, right? When we have dialogue with each other. Understanding that, like you just said, there's a lot of hurt there. There's a lot of pain there, right? Whether it's not necessary, it's not just Black men hurting Black women. Black women have hurt Black men too, right? And that's where we get into the environmental piece as well. But I hear a lot of like, for example, when I hear men talk with a lot of vitriol towards Black women, and you have women that will come in and minimize that hurt and say, "Who hurt you?" or "Your mama Black." And for me, my response internally, I don't say this out loud all the time. I'm usually like, yes, his mother is Black. And what if he told you that's where his pain come from? Would you believe him as a Black woman? Right? Because I say, even in our community, for many reasons, the matriarch is almost infallible,
Mhm.
untouchable. No one can speak about the matriarch, right? It's almost this idea of you don't bite the hand that feeds you. And that's because a lot of us come from single parent households. So it's hard to address the hand that was smacking you all over the place but also feeding you. So
Yeah.
it's a very difficult conversation for both men and Black women to have. But what I notice is a lot of Black women, when they have that conversation, it doesn't even register in their mind that perhaps the pain that you're seeing expressed by your brother was brought about by women that look like you. That never crosses their mind, right? And so I feel like we do have to talk about the environmental piece, like you said. So
Yeah.
when you go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, that's that's really important because I don't know, like there are a million different dynamics at
Yeah,
at
at
play
play.
in this situation. And that's what makes it all the more complicated to kind of like untangle this Russian knot that
Mhm,
we've been twisted
mhm.
into, right? This is not, this is no easy feat.
No.
And if you consume the propaganda of blackness uncritically, it's very easy to arrive at conclusions that, like, I don't want anything to do with a black woman, or vice versa. I don't want anything to do with a black man. Like, those conclusions are very easy to reach when you see um just certain behavior that you're looking at and that's being fed to you on a consistent basis online, right? So if you
Yes.
don't have the ability to filter that, right, it'll definitely alter your personal algorithm so that you start to, you know, make a set of decisions that ultimately end in, the self deletion or self removal of your line, because that's the goal. That's the goal of it all. Now, the reason why the environmental piece is important, because we have to have a
Wait, Omawale, I'm
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. My apologies, because I know I want to give you the space to do that. Let me just make sure I acknowledge those who just came in. D1 Beats, peace and blessings to you. Hey Ashan, good to see you, brother. All right, Omawale, take it away. My apologies.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And while y'all here, make sure y'all like and make sure y'all subscribe to the channel. Let's help our sis grow her channel. So make
Yes,
sure. Go ahead, baby. Go do that, and then come right back. I'm sorry. I'm on.
you're fine. You're fine.
Hold on one second.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I got my
It's okay.
my 4-year old over here with me. But yeah, the environmental piece is critical, because when we ask ourselves kind of like what goes into the production, of a healthy human being, right?
Hmm.
What goes into the production of a healthy male, or a healthy female that is capable of meeting the demands and responsibilities of adulthood?
Hmm.
Like, when we understand that that is something that is intentional, everything in the environment serves to produce that, right? The
Hmm.
family becomes the first institution that becomes the transmitter of culture, but
Correct.
all of the institutions surrounding family are meant to protect that nucleus, or that
Hmm.
vital cell, that makes up the collective body, or
Hmm.
makes up like the nation. So when it comes to, our government institutions, our economic institutions, our military institutions, policy, legislation, all these things are meant to create a healthy ecosystem for that family unit to thrive, right? And for the male and females that come through that particular unit to be able to be educated and socialized in a way so that they can go through their developmental stages
Hmm.
into adulthood and relate in a healthy way to keep kind of like that production of culture and family moving forward. For Black people, by and large, those mechanisms have been destroyed.
Yes.
So when you look at the atmosphere that produces us, like, we can't, I can't be mad at Black people for the level of dysfunction
Hmm.
and, maladaptive responses that we see, which is what produces this gender conflict that we see. However, like, if we're going to even begin to address it, right, that requires okay, we have to have these conversations around ego, because ego is what won't allow us to address some of these things, because there's shame associated with it, and is like, we put up this facade, we put up this face, to the world, because we don't want to have to address the shame, the pain,
Hmm.
the trauma, that we've had to endure.
Hmm.
But in order to fix it, we're going to have to go through all of those things. And when we have these conversations about how can we hold one another accountable, well, all accountability means is that you are asking someone to take responsibility for a particular outcome that they were involved in, right?
Okay.
So if you look at the Black family, or if you look at the state of Black relationships,
Hmm.
there is a responsibility that both Black men and Black women have to take for, like, the state of things. Like, we have to hold ourselves responsible.
Hmm.
Although, like, that environmental piece, it matters. I'm not like ignoring that.
Right. Right.
The parts that we can control, where can we start to have the conversation around like accountability there? And I think
Mm-hmm.
we try when we attempt to introduce that, because people feel powerless, because people feel infantilized, that all the control is outside of their hands, then right away they feel like they are being attacked, and it just turns into, okay, well, let's attack one another and let's deflect, and let's derail because we don't want to deal with this because we can't do anything about it.
Well,
It's like,
can you speak to the basic things that are not out of our control? Just basic stuff that we could actually begin to do to heal the relationship between each other. Stuff that's well within our control that we're just not doing.
yeah, 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 yeah. Wow. So when we start talking about relational dynamics, because
Mhm.
I think that's what you're referring to when you're
Yes.
talking
No,
about
not intimate, just our relationship in
relational.
general.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm
Okay.
not talking about I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm just talking
Okay.
about relational. How do you
Okay. Yes.
relate kind of
Mm-hmm.
like in a positive way? So like
Yes.
things like the ways in which we communicate with one another.
Yes.
Like I heard it said a long time ago that like, you know, I can't control what somebody else does, but I can always control like how I respond. So
Yes.
it does take it takes a level of maturity,
Mhm.
but I want to be fair here, right? Because we're also when and acknowledging the environmental factors, right? Because what we're getting at now,
Mhm.
pardon, I just had a conversation on Sunday where we were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that base need, the food, clothing,
Yes.
shelter,
Mm-hmm.
safety,
Maslow. Mm-hmm.
belonging. It's hard to mature emotionally or develop what they refer to as emotional intelligence if you don't have the space to do that.
I agree.
If you're always in this reactive space
Mhm.
or reactionary space because your immediate needs are not met, your needs of safety, that if that's not there, then it becomes really difficult for us to develop ourselves, at these higher levels that make for better communication, that makes for a more relational dynamic. So what you essentially have in our community is you have people who are developmentally children
Mm.
trying to trying to work out adult problems without adult skills.
Mm.
And that's why this fight or this conflict continues, because we haven't had the space to acquire those skills, or more importantly than the space, we haven't had the experience to acquire those skills. You know what I mean? So I think that this is some of the challenges that
How do we go about creating and cultivating those spaces if we are still in the environment that has caused us to be sick in the first place? How do we go about doing that? Because I find that to be a challenge over Wally. I'm being very honest. This has always been a challenge, and I'm all for like respect to the healing um collective just within the black community, right? It's a lot of respect there, right? I think that that's absolutely necessary, but I feel like these people still have to go back out into the world and function and go back into their families. And so the space that you, and I agree with you, by the way, in the beginning where you said this platform or this space may not be the best space to have that level of conversation.
Mhm.
So, what spaces would you say need to be created outside of the social media spaces? What does that look like in your mind?
Yeah, well, you asked first in terms of what we need to do,
Yes.
and I
Sorry.
think a part of that is we have to speak a radical truth to one another that's rooted in love for one another. And I think that takes a little bit of discernment. You know what I mean? Because like, with your words you can kill or you can heal. You know what I mean? So I
Absolutely.
think that you have to absolutely um y- you know be careful with how you dispense the medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
truth is the medicine, right? We have to be careful because not everybody is fit for consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to give. They say with babes, you got to give babes milk because they're not really ready for meat. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
it's like having that level of wisdom, or discernment. But we have to create the um, the scaffolding. Right. So if you think about a building being rehabilitated, right?
Mm-hmm.
A building, let's say that the infrastructure is weak. And if y'all watching, I'm not a construction person, so y'all allow me a little bit of leeway with my
Go
analogy.
for it.
Let's just say like you have to rehabilitate a building. Oftentimes on that site, you'll see, scaffolding, placed around, like structures put around it to prepare for that transformation, right?
Okay.
And I think that the Black family is that building that needs to be rehabilitated. So,
Okay.
what's some of the scaffolding or structures that need to go around it? Well, we have women's groups that are out here, healing groups, healing circles. We have men's groups.
Mm-hmm.
We have organizations that we are developing to meet the needs that need to be addressed that are not going addressed, whether those needs be for food, for protection. I think you have to see more of that being created by us around the Black family in
Mm-hmm.
order to restore it. But the most important thing for me is whatever project, program, or initiative that we have that's supposed to be for the improvement or development of that family unit, it really does have to be rooted in our values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, so the importance of being African centered or Afrocentric, like, there are no other terms on which you can heal Black people. And that's been a lot of my problem with a lot of people who diagnose the problem, but their treatment plan is basically white supremacy. Like the
Mm-hmm.
treatment plan becomes like, hey, just be what white men are or be what white women are. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
that's not who we are. So that value component is incredibly important because without that, like, you're really just creating or adding to the mass psychosis that Black people are suffering from. So you need a change in values, a change in consciousness that can really start to be kind of like the cement or the foundation that a new African or a new Black family can stand on.
Do you think, as you were speaking, uh, I had Mancho and Washa Edouan last on Friday. And one of the things that Mancho was talking about, like even since you're talking about the family unit, so he was explaining that when it comes to adults, when it comes to the two adults in that relationship, in the family dynamic, husband, wife, who we listen to as far as who we seek counsel from in keeping our families together and so forth, he gave five qualifiers. And one, I'll just run through them. He says, one, the person needs to be in a relationship, right? They needs to be in a relationship. Two, they have to really love Black people. Okay, that has to be a qualifier. He says, three, they have to have an understanding of the global system of racism, white supremacy. That is important. And then four, he says there has to be systems that operate outside of you in place. And also the last one was five, the person has to have credentials beyond social media. And so that was the last one. And so as you were speaking, that came back to my mind. My I guess my question to you would be in follow up to and building on what you just said. Okay, so yes, we have these groups, women groups, men groups, and so forth. Now, should men be speaking to women, or should women be holding women accountable and men holding men accountable? In your opinion?
I think it's a both and.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, like I think that women need to hold one another responsible,
Hmm.
but I think that African women and African men need to hold African men accountable, and African women and African men need to hold African women accountable, right? Because if we're talking about the relationship,
Okay.
like how can we so the relationship, is a macro concept, but if we
Okay.
bring it down to the individual level, right?
Okay.
Let's say,
Mhm.
myself and my wife,
Okay.
and we are trying to repair the dynamic, and we're going through that therapeutic process.
Mhm.
We're leveraging our resources, so maybe we bring in, the broader community to assist with that, right? That can, include like a spiritual advisor, that can include some counseling, some
Mhm.
therapy. But in order for that to work, the man has to be able to hold his woman accountable and
Mhm.
himself. And the woman has to be able to hold her man accountable and herself.
Very true.
So if we have to do that at that basic level, then it doesn't make sense for us to say when we get to the ultimate or the macro level that we stop doing that. It just doesn't make sense.
Okay. Okay. The reason why I ask is because I know, and it could just be in these spaces. Everyone seems to be escalated every day, all day, 24/7 for whatever reason. I think it goes back to their algorithm and what they're consuming, which just feeds their own algorithm. So that's at the forefront of their mind all the time. So when they come into the spaces, they're not trying to have conversations, they're trying to have debates, right? They're trying to win you over to their way of thinking. That's kind of how the conversation happens in this space. So I think what happens oftentimes is on social media. I was just on Clubhouse the other day. The way that men talk to each other is very different, very very different, and that's okay because there's some different wiring between men and women, and that doesn't have to be weaponized. That doesn't have to become an issue. It doesn't have to be seen as a deficit. It is to be honored and respected, right, and acknowledged. And so, how men talk to men, I think that what I see oftentimes is men think that they can communicate that way to women, and those women are going to receive it like they're boys on the basketball court or in the barber shop, and I'm like, no. And they literally feel, a lot of men feel like they shouldn't have to, don't police their tone, in a sense, right? They shouldn't have to switch up to talk to you. What do you think about that? Is there a way for you to get, like, you're married, is there a way for you to, do you have a way that you use to get through to your wife? Because maybe there's another way that doesn't work, and maybe this way works better for her. Is that component missing from our conversations?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the male female communication dynamic is not a good one. It's not, it's not a good one for many reasons. So here's how I'll start this.
Okay.
My first argument would be that too many of us as black people take our cues on how the male female dynamic should be from white men and
Mm,
white women because
I
we
agree.
see them as the adults,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Unconsciously, it's meant societal, but like, let's speak facts.
Yes. Mhm.
So we look at their relational dynamic and we say, okay, well, that's how it's supposed to be. That becomes the standard. And then we attempt to model it. Their relational dynamic is broken. It doesn't work for them. It's absolutely not going to work for us.
Mhm.
That's the first part.
Okay.
The second part is that in order for a community to truly be healthy, that intact, functional, intergenerational dynamic has to exist. You have to
Mhm.
have stages: children, teens, young adults, adults, middle age, your elders. This is all important
Mhm.
because you're going to have a set of different relationships at each stage in your life.
Very true.
And where you stand in that relationship is going to be different at each stage in your life.
Mhm.
Now, the problem that we have is that in order to acquire certain skill sets to effectively communicate as men and women, it takes years of practice. And then that wisdom from that years of practice is passed down through culture.
Mhm.
That particular transmission and that experience model is broken within our community.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of people who have years of experience relating to male to woman or woman to male, right? Or female to male. Like we just don't
Absolutely.
have it. So
Yeah.
because those dynamics are broken, we have to figure out how to acquire them and other ways. So I want to start there,
Okay.
right? It is impossible, right, to talk to every like woman the same way. It's impossible to communicate with you if you have multiple children. It's
Yes.
impossible to communicate with my children the same way. So it's like if all I have in my toolkit is a hammer and I'm using my hammer on, like, my hammer is not going to work on, like, you need more tools or tools of communication, you know, in your tool bag. And it
Mhm.
takes time and experience, but more importantly, it takes community to develop them, right? Because not
Mm.
all of the experience you're going to have yourself. Sometimes you have to learn and leverage other people's experiences, and they can give you some tools to work with. So yeah, we can't talk to women the way that we talk to men, and we can't talk to all women the same, right? And it takes just a little bit of wisdom to understand that. But here's the other part of that equation. As men, we are heavily logic, like left brain.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Women are heavily
Right.
relational,
Mhm.
like right brain.
Mhm.
And sometimes we are so focused on the facts of the situation, right?
Yes.
That we'll completely ignore the feelings.
Yes.
That's an explosion waiting to happen right there. You can't,
Mhm.
it is like you'll never have a successful relationship or successful communication with a woman if you don't learn to hear what she's saying beyond the facts of the situation. And if you
Mhm.
don't learn when and where necessary to validate
Mhm.
what it is that she feels, because in some cases that'll be the only way that she'll know that she's being heard, right? Now, male to male, I don't care how you feel. And maybe that's a part of my underdevelopment, but just the way that we were raised, just like, yo, man, I'm gonna say what I say. If your feelings get hurt, they shouldn't have been in the way, right? That's how we talk. Like, man up, like, get out of your feelings. Like, that's how we talk to one another, like, as men. So I don't know if that's even the most healthy, but that's the
Yeah.
dynamic,
Right.
that men, how we communicate. But
But
when it
there's the flip side of that, Omawale. I would say, as a woman speaking to you here on this platform, one of the things that I think us as women, the sisters, need to understand: our men don't want to hear all that fluff.
no, 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 no.
Take that shit to your girls. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm being honest here. Like, men, because that's not the way you guys' brains are set up. Your guys are like, okay, what's the issue? What needs to be fixed? All this other fluff stuff, all of this emotion, you're gonna
That's
lose me
key.
in that.
That's key. And it gets back again to healthy communal dynamics,
Yeah.
because the problem is with this European family dynamic, you are an individual unit on an island, right?
Mm,
But in order to have a healthy relationship, that relationship has to be plugged into a community of relationships.
I agree. I
So
agree.
the woman who's in that marriage has to have access to a community of women who are also at the same stage that she is at. And the men have to have access to a community of men, right? So that way, because not your partner can't be your counselor, your lover, your best friend. If you think of all of the types of relationships we require to be healthy and whole,
Yeah.
it's insane to expect one person to be able to provide that to us. It's
Agreed.
impossible,
Agreed.
right? So it is important, right? And then again, having having that discernment. But the reality is a lot of women, like, and a lot of men, like, for example, myself, I'm 38, married for
Mm-hmm.
10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only friend in my immediate circle, right, that has that dynamic.
Oh, okay.
Now, I have other friends that have that, but they're people who I met on the internet, or met by way of work,
Mm-hmm.
that don't live near me, so they have a similar situation, but we're not in physical community. So that
Mm-hmm.
means that my relationship is on an island. So that means that my relationship is weak. But if that's the reflection of what our relationships look like, relationships require a community to support them and to feed them so that they can thrive. You need that connection. That relationship unit cannot stand on its own, which is why we try to replace the community with success and money and acquiring, nice things. Or what happens? Okay, that couple was together for 15 years, but now they're divorced because it has no roots. It's not plugged into anything else. It's just them two, and they can't withstand alone without a community around them. That's tough.
It's very interesting because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is how much does the individualistic mindset um add to the breakdown in our relationships and just relationships in general, that in the and I think you're speaking to it right here, where you think like you're an island onto yourself, and for me personally, I'm just like, you cannot grow that way, because all your spirituality and whatever else, when are you practicing that? Where's the field work? Field here, field work. When are you putting in the field work? When are you making what you are learning practical? You need other people to do that, right? You need to connect with other people, especially when you talk about phases in your life. Who you was at 20 something as a mother is not who you're going to be at 50 something, 60 something as a grandmother. Where is the community to support you in that? But one of the things that I just realized, even in having a conversation with you, that specific part of the conversation is that I personally believe that we know we're different as men and women. But and it's not for whatever reason. I think there are some environmental factors at play here, but I think we can go a long way in just entering into conversations with each other, right? With that fact, with that truth. Hey, Omawale, you're a man. You do not even hear the way I do. You don't even hear the way I do, right? And you don't process information. If I could just enter into a conversation knowing that, acknowledging that, and being okay with that, I think our conversations can go further and they can happen at a more healthier level than they are right now. But what we're doing is we're coming in and we're saying, you all you want to be is logical. We start to weaponize
You're,
these
you're, you're
differences.
expecting your male, your husband, to relate to you how your girlfriends relate to you.
Correct, and it's and on both sides, just like you said, you can't expect that from a woman, and we can't expect that from you guys. But I know we're almost at the hour, so I wanted to talk quickly about okay, the divestment crew. Okay, no, we're not gonna talk about the divestors. I'm gonna leave them alone because they showed up in my chat the other day. Okay, so black woman's ego. I'm a
Um,
black woman. We're having this conversation as brothers and sisters.
yeah.
When you talk about the black woman ego contributing to the breakdown between black men and black women, what are you speaking about?
That's a good question. So let me just be clear. The ego is
Okay,
contributing to our breakdown.
the
Now,
ego.
yeah,
Okay,
in general,
okay, hmm,
but both black men and black women have an ego.
correct,
So I'm not singling out one or the other.
correct.
I'm more than willing, and I have been having the conversations about the black male ego.
Okay,
The conversation that's been off the table is the black female ego. Now, some of the examples that came up in that conversation, which were actually like pretty hurtful, you know, as a black man, right? You talked about kind of like those 5 components
hmm,
that someone needs to have before they speak on the situation in our
hmm,
community. I think the third was like an understanding of racism, white supremacy.
yes, hmm,
Now, if this is my struggle, and I know that we are different, So I know that I experience this system different than you do,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
If I'm if you're my mate, if you're my support,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm coming to you and I'm sharing with you what it is that I am experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and you're taking that and you're saying to me, stop being lazy, stop complaining.
Mm-hmm.
You must be, you are bringing on your own oppression because I'm doing well. Why can't you? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's like, how can I relate to somebody like that?
Okay.
And if that belief and idea starts to be widespread, then we have to question, and we have to check it. You understand what I'm saying? Because that's what I mean by it's detrimental to harmonious relationships when we can't even understand, one another anymore. So there is no giving grace because that understanding becomes replaced with a level of disdain for one another. It's like, now I'm starting to, you know, promote and harbor certain ideas about you that are, not just deleterious, but also really serve to advance your removal. Because if you know anything about, genocidal ethics
Mm-hmm.
and the role of propaganda,
Mm-hmm.
if you are trying to ethnically cleanse a people, a part of that you have to demonize them, and the way you demonize them is by dehumanizing them. So
Absolutely.
you start to, oh, these people are trash. It's like all of the propaganda removes any sense of humanity, complexity, multi-dimension from their being, and it flattens them out as just something that is totally useless and ready to be cleansed or removed. And that's what we're hearing from, somebody dubbed them the Ku Klux Keishas, right? So I'm not going to say the D
Oh
word.
my.
That particular segment, those are the ideas that they are advancing. They are advancing genocidal ideas as it pertains to black men. So how could I ever be in a relationship with somebody who thinks like that? But more importantly, what is it internally, right? Like, what has happened with this person that would even allow them to reach such conclusions? You know what I mean? That would allow them to buy into this notion that, man, like, I'm thriving, I'm doing well, I'm getting my bag, and I'm doing it because I'm magic.
Mm-hmm.
And you falling behind because you're a bum or you're a dusty.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
all this nonsense. So, like, this is the silliness that we're dealing with. But again, if you remember what I said earlier in the conversation, we have to remember we are dealing with children.
Okay.
These are children. I don't care how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
These are underdeveloped children who are attempting to handle adult problems with their child skill set, which is why everything that we see is maladaptive, because they don't have the maturity or emotional intelligence or emotional development that would be befitting of their age to actually deal with the problems that we have to contend with. Like, that's what we up against.
Mm. Okay, so I know we're going to be closing out soon. So talk to me about, um, can that be addressed without us creating a full-on so-called gender war between ourselves? Because I feel like we are already being warred upon, and to create a war within being war upon, like, like, that doesn't make sense. So for me, it's how do we talk to each other about, you made some really good points just now. That one example alone, we can have a whole program around that, right? That was a lot, right? Just one example. How do we, just like you just told me, that I listened, how do we have that level of conversation without it becoming a full-blown war? If we're dealing with children, how do we go about doing that? Should we be talking on the elementary level,
Yeah.
Can we start there? Mm-hmm.
So here's what I would say that it would require. Um, there is an element, and I hate to say this, but we're going to have to acknowledge it that everybody is not going to make it.
Okay.
You
Fair.
know, so in that regard, we have to figure out who is our community,
Okay.
because black alone does not make you our community. And that community that we talk about cannot be housed online. It has to be in the real world. So the reality is it's going to be small, you know, but we have to find ways to better connect and better communicate. So even though it may be small pockets, at least those pockets can be better networked and connected,
Okay.
because the flood is coming. So, biblically speaking, if you know the flood is coming, work on your ark,
Mm,
because we know what's coming.
yeah.
So their suicidal ideations and their anger and their wrath, it might cannot be healed. But for those of us who kind of like understand what the stakes are, I don't think that we have the luxury and or liberty to wallow in the mud with folks who, it's like a pig. Like they are
Mm,
enjoying being in their own filth. So
mm,
those of us who are trying to clean up and do something different with one another and build better relational units of
mhm.
male and female that can produce healthy families that can be the foundation for healthy communities, we have to separate and quarantine,
Mm,
right? Those who are infected and who are sick can't come in until
mm,
they go through a process of cleansing. So that's one part, right? The establishing of communities that are going to be small, that we have to protect by any means necessary. Not all black people can come in. It's not all black ideas can come in.
yeah.
Not all black values can come in and be represented. We got to be exclusive in that regard. So that's the first part. And the second part is this: we have to train some facilitators, because we need qualified people to be appointed to do the training and the teaching,
Okay.
right? Everybody has a microphone now, so anybody can speak,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean we all should.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like, and I want to send a happy birthday to Dr. Joy DeGruy, because she always talks about building that army of healers.
Mm-hmm.
We truly do need an army of qualified healers that can do this work, help facilitate the intrapersonal work,
Okay.
that we have to do in order to relate better to one another. And a lot of that has to deal with what? Killing of the ego, so that the ego can be reborn. Your divine self can be born. You understand what I'm saying? It's like
Mm-hmm.
this false self that we've created to deal with the pain and trauma of the world that we've experienced is a false self. And that's our representative that shows up in the world. It's our representative that shows up in all of our relationships. And that representative is not always the best to be relational. So if you can actually examine that representative and realize that I created it, so I have the power to destroy it so that my real self can be born, myself that's connected, right? Myself that
Yeah.
is the divine,
Yes.
that's your transformed higher self. And when we come to relate at that level, what we create will be of that magnitude. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what when I say kill the ego, it don't mean that I want black women to check your pride. And that's not what I'm saying. It's not a self-esteem conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conversation that I would have loved to have at the deeper spiritual level.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, because so many people are anchored to the BS or to the trash, we couldn't really ascend to that level of the discussion.
Hmm. Okay. Well, Omawale, I'm gonna have to.
My daughter's right here, so I'll take like I know you wanted to do Q&A, so
No, 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 it's
I'll
fine.
give you a few minutes.
Let
You
me
wanna do
see.
Q&A.
Actually, we don't have any questions. People were just stating a few things. Um, but what you just said is the realization I had come to. My bubble was popped when I entered this space, because offline I am a part of a smaller community of like-minded people, and it doesn't mean that the woman and the men, we've had many conversations. Um, the irritated genie used to lead these conversations at Everlasting Life in and between men and women, and it would get intense around like relationship and relating to each other. But the thing was, everyone in there wanted the same outcome. And that's what made the conversations different. That's what helped evolve the conversations. That's where we weren't throwing food across the room at each other or stomping off or storming out. I think that's what makes the difference. And so at this point, for me, I'm just like, okay, you know what? Whoever I could connect with in this space and then connect with offline, that's what I'm going to do. But
Yeah.
I'm going to bring conversations before the people because that's how I met my aunt. I met my aunt here, right? I don't know if I would have met her otherwise. And she's become a good sister of mine. And so I agree with you. You have to find like-minded people. I know, I'm rethinking echo chambers a little bit. Echo chambers doesn't work for the purpose of entertainment, but echo chambers work for the purpose of building together because you have to be on one accord. You cannot enter the room and say, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, and so we can't go forward until you become Christian or you become Muslim. Then we get nowhere. But if everyone could come and say, okay, you know what I practice in my spirituality, that's for that. But here's what we need. We need better families, right? We need to educate our own children. We need to grow our own foods, right? We need to build our own schools. If we can agree in that and we can start towards that process, all of that other stuff, it becomes minuscule, it becomes small, right? And so for me, I'm just like, but you need like-mindedness. The like-mindedness is we have the same outcome in mind. That's what we
Yeah.
want, right?
Yeah.
Building community pretty much. But Omawale, I'm not gonna keep you. So
I
because I don't
appreciate you.
really see any questions, but I do want to bring you back and have a different actually evolve this particular conversation because I feel like we could have gone a little bit deeper because we were going there and then I kept checking the time like
You
I don't
got to check out
know
my next. I'm gonna be traveling on Sunday, so I decided to do a live show on the road.
on the
And it's
road.
a call-in show. So the title is High Value Men versus High Value Relationship.
I saw that.
And it's about the need to evolve the conversation from this, high value men conversation, to what is a high value relationship and
Hmm.
what are the skills required to produce that, because your bank account can't produce that.
Hmm.
You being fit, feminine, and friendly can't produce that. That can help with acquisition, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to seal the deal, okay, that can help. But okay, now that you've sealed the deal, how do you co-create this relationship and the relational ecosystem that feeds both parties? That's
Hmm.
a different
That's
conversation.
a different
So, how do
conversation. And
we
you said you're having this on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it on Sunday. I'm gonna be
What
on the road.
time?
I'm gonna be in a hotel Sunday at 8 o'clock. So I'm gonna just hit live. Anybody's welcome to call in because I want to just understand like what do we think a high value relationship is? Like what are the attributes? So y'all think about that and y'all pull out. Let's have that conversation.
Okay, guys, I put Omawale's YouTube page in the chat. So you guys make sure you guys go over and subscribe and tune in on Sunday. It's open call, so you guys can call in and are you flushing anyone on that day, Omawale? Are you utilizing the toilet that day?
I try not to, man. But so when people come talking the nonsense, sometimes I gotta get them because it's like it's so hard to have a mature conversation. It really is, like so. I really don't flush people. I've flushed 3 people. One was this mixed race girl who started talking some nonsense about
Uh-huh.
being mixed race, and it got real weird. So she got flushed because it was weird. Then we got this Volvo Rants guy, who was just the firewall of ignorance was so connected that it was
Mhm.
almost impenetrable. So I'm like, okay, this is a waste. And then the hashtag lady, Miss Ann. I don't want to even say her name, but Miss Ann, like the just level of dishonest, and like she was just
And it took you a long time to even get there, by the way, with her. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've
Mhm.
exercised a lot of patience. I don't
Mhm.
just flush people just to, just for entertainment so people can
Mhm.
laugh. Like, I try not to do that. You know what I mean? But
Well, I'm
sometimes
sorry, it's hilarious. So whether it's for entertainment or not, when you hear that flush and the person is no longer present, it's like, yo, it's the funniest thing. I'm sorry. But
man,
anyway, I'm gonna let you go, Umawale. I appreciate your time. I will pass through on Sunday for sure. And until then, I will say peace and blessings to you and your family.
same to you,
And
and peace
thanks
and
for giving me
blessings
your time. I
to the chat.
appreciate you.
All right,
Okay.
peace,
Bye
peace.
bye. Okay, guys. So, if you have not subscribed as yet, go to Umawale's channel. I'm gonna post the link one more time. He will be having that conversation, like he said, on Sunday. Oh, wisdom bars. My apologies. I wish I got your question before he left. You were asking, does Umawale have any recommendations on how to heal and what does being healed look like? Okay, I'm gonna try to bring Umawale back so that we can have another conversation. Because I feel like he is someone that I can take it there with. Um, and there's still the respect is still maintained, and the brotherhood, I mean, not the brotherhood, the brotherly and sisterly respect and love will remain. So I'm definitely going to try to see if I can bring him back and have that conversation. But I want to make sure I acknowledge a few people. Wireless woman, I see you. Thanks for passing through, sis. Wisdom bars, thank you for passing through and joining us in this conversation. Let me see if I missed anyone else. I did say shout out to Ashan already. Peace to you. And guys, if you're here and you haven't subscribed, just go back out, hit the hit the subscribe button. I will be back here on Friday at 5 p.m. I am going to be having a conversation with Diallo Kenyatta about the question is, will black capitalism save us? And so there's a lot of conversations happening around that, specifically when after that Jay-Z interview and so forth. So I wanted to bring someone on to have that conversation. So make sure you guys pass back through on Friday at 5 p.m. I think it's at 6 p.m. actually. At 6 p.m. Sorry, I changed the time at 6 p.m. For that conversation around black capitalism. And until next time, guys, I am going to say thank you for being here and giving me your time. You could have been anywhere else, but you were here with us. So, peace and blessings to you and your family. See you guys on Friday at 6 p.m.